I'm going to share the places I spent time in, why I chose them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I know this isn't the largest channel in our industry, not even close to it. However, I think where we excel is transparency. And I am guaranteeing you full transparency in this video. This is where our focus will be today. And just to be clear, I do make money promoting the countries we're discussing in today's video. So if you don't like this fact and think I'm biased, you're welcome to close this video right now. However, if you decide to stay until the end of the video, I'm gonna fill you in on all of my investments, something you shouldn't miss out on. No stones unturned. All right, let's talk about the first country that we've been talking so much about on this channel, and this is the country of Paraguay. And let's start out talking about why I personally chose Paraguay. Well, there's a reason for everything in life. Things happen for a reason. The reason why I chose Paraguay was because I saw a lot of potential in this specific part of the world. And I'm talking about the reciprocity in civil and property rights. I'm talking about owning land, owning real estate, owning companies, getting permanent, unconditional residency, and having a path to citizenship if need be. And all of this is provided in Paraguay. All of this is handed to me pretty much on a silver platter. And this is why I chose Paraguay. The place where I was raised is actually quite similar to Paraguay in many ways, and you might think, why? Well, it's pretty boring, okay? Paraguay is not the most exciting place on this planet. It is not a buzzing metropolis like Bangkok. You know, it is not anything like Bangkok. It is not anything like Kuala Lumpur. What Paraguay is, what Paraguay stands for, is a modest collectivist society that appreciates community life. And if you want that, and that's why I'm saying throughout this video and throughout all the videos or many videos that we have posted on this channel, you need to find the right lid for your pot. This is what it's all about. Life is not about chasing a fantasy or chasing an ideology that does not resonate with you. You want to go after what resonates with you. And we're all uniquely different. We have different values, we have different motives. What motivates me might not motivate you. And this is how you need to start looking at things if you haven't done so yet. If you have approached life in a way that it serves your ultimate purpose best, you probably do not learn much in the next few seconds or so. But if you haven't found this path of yours yet, because you've been chasing a narrative that's been pushed by our industry's leaders for such a long time, and you've been in the dark or you've been misled, then it might be time for you to refocus yourself and find a path that works for you. And there are many paths to choose from. There is not one individual path that works for you. I think there are many paths that work for you. However, the fundamentals, right? The values, they should always be part of this path of yours. And this is very important. So anyway, going back now to Paraguay, I chose Paraguay because I just like how laid back it is. I like to live in a humble place. You know, I don't like places that are superficial. I do not like superficial places. And this is just my perspective. This is how I look at things. I much rather keep more money in the bank, give money away to charities. I much rather spend money on collecting things that I personally like. Could I do this in Dubai? Sure. Could I do this in Singapore? Sure. And I'm doing it actually in Texas. But anyway, the point is that I have found a path that works for me. And it resonates, like Paraguay resonates with me on many levels. So it's one of my favorite countries. You might want to call it a flag. Potentially it is a flag for me because I spend a good amount of time per year in Paraguay and it works for me. However, I'm going to say it doesn't work for everyone. And now comes the bad and the ugly, okay? And you should know about these things because I think it's important to be educated. It's important to be told the truth. And Paraguay is not perfect. Paraguay is not perfect at anything. Paraguay is an interesting place. It's an emerging country. It offers a territorial tax system, low local taxes, friendly locals, pretty good food actually, because it's very internationalized already. Like Paraguay offers a variety of foods, not just the local cuisine. We're talking about the Paraguayan food, which is also good. There are certain dishes I actually like, especially the soup dishes, pretty good. However, since so many people have moved to Paraguay over the past years, we're talking about people from Asia, from South America, from Europe, so the cuisine in Paraguay has really turned into an international cuisine, if you will. And some dishes have been mixed. There's Brazilian food, food from Argentina, European food, food from other parts of South America, right? And also Asian cuisine, right? You have everything there. So that's pretty good. But one of the things you need to know about Paraguay is that it is not the best of countries to own a sports car. If you're into sport cars, okay, then Paraguay is not the best of places for you, for the simple reason that the roads are just not the best. The roads, they do need to get upgraded. Many places across the city of Asunción. It's not just a specific neighborhood. It's many places where the roads are just not perfect, Many roads are privately funded. Many roads are actually stone roads with uneven surfaces. So if you want to have a really nice car, a BMW M5, or if you want to have a Porsche, a Lamborghini, Maserati, a Ferrari, whatever car you want to have, maybe Paraguay is not the best of places for you to drive that kind of car. The roads aren't ready for it yet. So that's a definite downside, that's a definite negative. And then there's also other problems, like the weather. It gets really hot in Paraguay, like sizzling hot. Like if you have never been in a hot country, it would be not a good idea to start out in Paraguay because you're going from one extreme to another, and that rarely works out. I recommend a soft transition. Okay, you want to have a soft landing. And unless you really know that the weather in Paraguay will work for you, I recommend you starting out in a country where the weather is more similar to what you're accustomed to back home. Maybe it's a bit warmer, but it still has some of the same concept, the same temperature or the same humidity. If you go to a place that's drastically different, you may not like it, or you may not be able to adjust to that new place. So really think about this, okay? But there are many people who have never lived in a foreign country. They're from a northern country, talking about the northern hemisphere of our planet. Let's say they're from Canada, Northern Europe, and they start out in Southeast Asia and they make it. They actually love it there. So maybe it's not right for me to say you shouldn't give it a shot. You certainly should, but go to Paraguay, and get a feel for it. But if you like warm weather, if you like hot weather, if you like humidity, and if you like living in a tropical country, then Paraguay is probably a good bet. But I'm just saying there are some definite disadvantages to living in Paraguay. It's the full package, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, talking about Asunción, in terms of corruption, there is corruption in many Latin American countries. It's something that you cannot run away from. It exists everywhere. I personally haven't witnessed it at all because of a number of reasons. However, in other countries where I also spend time in, like in Mexico, I have witnessed a lot more corruption, specifically police corruption. In Mexico, the police will often try to get out a bribe from a foreigner. It's a very common, very nationalized business model in Mexico, and it is specifically present in touristic areas like Mexico City, like the Caribbean side of Mexico. So we're talking about Cancun, Playa del Carmen. It's very, very popular in these specific regions. Just something to be aware of. Now in Paraguay, it depends. Like if you blend in, if you speak Spanish, you have actually a good chance of not falling victim to something like a bribe. Okay, you getting pulled over for a bad reason, for no reason. It certainly can happen, but it is not as common as it is in Mexico. In Mexico, it is much, much more common. Another reason for Paraguay is that in Paraguay, the Europeans, the North Americans, talking now about Caucasian men, they often do not stand out in Paraguay at all. Why is that? Well, because look at Paraguay's proximity to southern Brazil and Argentina. So in Paraguay, you have a lot of light-complected people. So I'm just going to say here, you're less of a target in Paraguay than you are in Mexico. It's just a matter of fact. You stand out less or you don't stand out at all. In fact, in Paraguay, I'm also a little bit brown because I spent a lot of time in the tropics over the years, that my tan changed, you know. My skin color changed. I actually have a bit of a tan now. But when before I went to Asia, I started to spend more time in Asia. Before I started spending more time in Asia, I was white like a piece of paper. But now it's not the case, right? Because I spend more time in the tropics, went to beaches a lot, stayed at places where I had a pool. So I was just more exposed to the sun than I was where I grew up. So as you can see, my skin color changed. Texas is a place where I spend a lot of time for a number of reasons. First of all, I am a resident of Texas. I'm a proud resident of Texas. I know this is kind of contradictory to some of the propaganda you're hearing from my competitors, competitive YouTube channels. They're telling you to get out of America and move to Eastern countries. I mean, there's truth to that, but there's also a lot of falsehood to that. I personally think that Texas is a great place. It's a great place for business. It's a great place for taxes. There's no state income tax in Texas. And it works for me, right? In Texas, I can own guns. That's important. I can own precious metals. It's a Republican state, and there are many Hispanic communities in Texas. So if that's where you want to be living, or if you want to be around Hispanic people, then you have many options across Texas. But there are also many business cities in Texas, like Dallas, Austin, Houston, right? You have a lot of networking opportunities in those cities. A couple of years ago, I became a resident of Texas, and I'm very grateful to have received this opportunity. To me, it isn't about the taxes, because I'm taking out enough to justify the tax burden I'm suffering from, because paying taxes is never fun. No matter where you're located, paying taxes is no fun. I don't care what anybody tells you, nobody wants to be paying their taxes, but it is part of a life. And in reality, there's no running from taxes. Why? Take a look at the people who are running away from taxes, from tax obligations. They may be able to escape such obligations for a short period of time until the place they move to decides to change the tax laws. Why? Legislation can be appealed. Tax laws can be changed from one year to the next, and we have seen this in multiple countries across multiple continents, specifically talking about the UAE, talking about Portugal's NHR option, the visa program for North Americans that want to live in Europe, and not just North Americans, actually many people who want to live in Portugal, they applied for the NHR program, and it's for 10 years. However, it changed already a couple times, and so the tax benefits are going away. In many countries, they're luring you into their jurisdictions or countries, because they know that once you're there, you're settled, and a lot of people will actually end up staying. Why do a lot of people end up staying? Well, they build a social circle, they buy a home, they have investments there, they have permanent residency, eventually they become a citizen. So of course people have more incentives to stay after a couple of years have passed. And this is often what happens. So the tax incentive is fantastic for getting people into a country and getting those people to commit to the country. We've also seen this in Italy. Italy used to offer up to a 90% tax break to new residents who have not resided in Italy for the previous number of years. I mean, it was just a great deal, or to first-time residents too. But this tax incentive has gone away. It has gone away. You know what it is now? 50%. So if you are now moving to Italy as a first-time resident and you want to take advantage of some of the tax benefits in Italy, then you're going to save taxes on half of your taxable income, but it's no longer as good as it used to be. Of course, the people who qualified under the old conditions are still allowed to continue their path, and that's perfectly fine. So Texas is great. It works for me. And some people think that, you're paying way too much taxes in Texas and you're not getting enough value. I don't know what those people are talking about. I know that Americans, they are complaining a lot about taxes, and they have good reasons for it. However, I have so many multi-million-dollar friends in America. I'm making good money too. I'm not poor, I'm also wealthy. And I managed to find ways to reduce my tax burden legally. there are certain things you can do. And this is all done legally. You do not want to mess with the IRS at all. I'm an immigrant in Texas, okay, but I feel very Texan. However, there are people in America, Americans, they don't want to live in America because in their mind they're just paying too much in taxes. And I understand that point of view, but then you talk to other people, also Americans, born in America, grew up in America, live in America, they find ways to minimize their taxes. So there are ways for you to do that legally. And we're talking about tax avoidance, which is legal. We're not talking about tax evasion, which is illegal. No, there are ways. And a lot of people, especially very rich people whose businesses are not predicated on the internet or not as much, they would never consider leaving America because there's just too much value there. There's so many amendments in America that are guaranteed by the Constitution that you will not find anywhere else. No country on this planet has as many amendments as America. It's just a matter of fact. Like in America, the right, the freedom to express yourself, freely, the right to own a firearm, the right to protect yourself, all of this is guaranteed by the Constitution. And you don't have that guarantee in Eastern countries. In some you have it, but it's not as strong. In Italy, the Italian Constitution is very strong in many regards, and that's why we recommend Italy. So Texas does work for me. I'm happy living in Texas. I have a good time in Texas, even though a lot of people think, oh, it's the worst of places. Well, and then some people say, well, at least it's a red state. I get it, but it works for me, it works for many people I know, and I have met many Texans over the years. Some of them I've done business with, I'm doing business with. Some of them are telling me, maybe it's time for me to leave. Others think, well, I've tried living in other places and nothing really feels like Texas or nothing feels as good. But there are countries that actually feel close to as good as Texas, like Paraguay is such a place. I can own firearms in Paraguay legally. In Paraguay, it's a pretty relaxed country. The people are nice. You can definitely express yourself freely in Paraguay. For the most part, it's probably not as strong as it is in America, but it's pretty damn good. Then we got Spain, okay? A country that I spend time in for the simple reason that I have family in Spain. And this really makes me go back to Spain a lot. And while I'm not living there like half the year, so I'm going back for like a few weeks here and there, and I'm meeting up with friends, family, because Spain is one of the countries I used to visit very early on in life. I started visiting Spain very early on in life. I have friends there who I met 15 years ago, or more than that actually, 20 years ago already. Time flies, like a long time, maybe like 15, 17 years, almost 20 years now. But there are some people, where I go there like, hey, it feels very homey, it feels good. And so that's important to me. You might have different aspirations, but in Spain, I think the quality of life is great. There's so many places to live in. I started out in Andalusia, which is one of the southern provinces or states, whatever it's called now in Spain. It's a pretty nice region, and I like it. I know it's changed a lot over the past decades. There's a lot of internationalism going on in Andalusia, and especially in Malaga, where I used to go to Spanish school. I used to learn Spanish there, long time ago, and I still remember back in the day what it looked like, and then the people I hung out with there, like people from Sweden and people from England and stuff. So it was actually a lot of fun. Nowadays I'm spending more time in the Canary Islands because I have family in the Canary Islands. I think it's a beautiful place. It's probably, I shouldn't say probably now, but it has been one of the most underrated places in Europe, I think. Now it's gone up. Prices have gone up, especially real estate prices, because the supply is limited. And if you take a look at the structure, the terrain, there is not a lot of land left to build property in the Canary Islands. I'm not talking specifically on the island of Tenerife, where I actually own a property. And so because of that, I think supply and demand will push the price up, because more people are looking to move there. Why? The weather's good. The people are relatively friendly. I think that the nature is fantastic. The climate is probably the best climate in the entire world. It's, they're talking about like Hawaii, Southern California, and the Canary Islands, talking about the Western Hemisphere, where it's also pretty safe for the most part. I think the Canary Islands is probably the safest out of the three places I just mentioned, even though Hawaii is pretty safe too. Southern California might have some issues here and there, probably the most out of these three places, but the Canary Islands, man, they're really a safe place to live in. However, there are also downsides, right? Look at its geographic location, and quite far away from mainland Spain. I mean, a couple hours by plane. But if you become a resident of the Canary Islands, you can actually qualify for massive deductions on travel, okay? Flight tickets, ferry tickets. So I think it's like a 75% deduction right now, which is really good. So if you love traveling from like the Canary Islands to Spain, but this is only valid for flights from the Canary Islands to Spain, to anywhere on the mainland. I think it's also valid if you're flying to like Mallorca or Ibiza. I think so. But if you want to fly to like London, or if you want to fly to like Germany, to Austria, to Scandinavia, you probably, have to pay the regular price. But I'm not talking about flights to the mainland. They're cheaper. They are heavily discounted because residents of the Canary Islands, they benefit from the special deal where they can travel from the Canary Islands to the mainland, at a 75% discount. So that's a tremendous deal. So a lot of people would, keep going back and forth because why? Flight tickets are incredibly inexpensive for residents of the Canary Islands, where they say, hey, why not? For instance, I know people that are going a lot to Madrid, they're going a lot to Malaga because they can fly there. And if they book the flight on time, they can fly there for like, I'm talking about a one-way ticket for like 20 euros, or 30 euros, or sometimes even less than that. It's crazy. Of course, if you need like a suitcase, if you have anything checked in, you have to pay for that. But I'm not just talking about the regular airfare without any, perks. But there are some problems in Spain, and in the Canary Islands too. For instance, one of the biggest problems is, of course, the, rental laws. I shot a video about this. I actually think 2 videos already talking about, the anti-landlord laws in Spain, which includes the Canary Islands, where I had a tenant in my apartment, and they made a big circus. They claimed to have lost one of the keys, and we gave them 2 keys, and they claimed to have lost one of them, and we had to change the log. And people know about the squatter law in Spain, and a lot of people are taking advantage of it. So this is a very negative aspect of owning property in Spain, because even if you don't rent it out, if you're not there and you have no one to look after your property, or even if you have someone look after your property, but all of a sudden a person shows up out of nowhere, decides to occupy your apartment, they break in, whatever, and they're in your apartment undetected for 48 hours, they legally can stay in your apartment for as long as it takes the court to evict them legally. You can't really evict them. I mean, you can, but technically the law says that you cannot. I also think that, like in Paraguay, for you to live in Spain, you do need Spanish. A lot of people say, you don't. I think it depends on where you live in Spain. If you live in Malaga and you have a lot of international friends, then maybe that's not the case. But anything you want to do in Spain, anything you want to do, anywhere you go to a restaurant, you need to speak Spanish, because people in Spain don't really speak English. Yes, there's some very touristic places where that's not the case, but for most places, you need Spanish. Anything you want to order, anything you want to pay for, anytime you're dealing with the government, anytime we need anything done, it happens in Spanish, with very few exceptions far in between. I have an uncle who lives in Geneva, Switzerland. He is a former Deputy United Nations High Commissioner, so he's a guy of great experience. Like, he went to Tanzania, right after the country became independent. He was in Pakistan, he was in Thailand for many years, so he spent time in different geographic locations across this planet, places that had recently opened up and that needed a lot of work. And he went there with the UN, and he had some really great stories to tell. I mean, he's still alive today. He still has some really good stories to tell. Geneva, Switzerland, a very interesting place. People there speak German, Italian, and French. Of course, it's a very international place. It's also the headquarters of the United Nations, where my uncle lives. But what's interesting about Geneva is that probably the city, or one of the cities with the highest quality of life across whole Europe. And Switzerland is not the cheapest of places if you want to qualify for a residency by investment deal there. Switzerland got lump sum taxation. So let's say you're making millions a year and you want to be paying, a couple $100,000 a year in taxes, then Switzerland might be a good place, because you're still paying a relatively acceptable tax rate. To live in a very advanced country, a very clean country, beautiful mountains, lakes, probably one of the highest quality of life in the entire world, not just in Europe, and you're around educated people, around very disciplined people. So Switzerland has a lot to offer, but it's not for poor people, it's not for average people, it's for people who really have money. It's for people with real money. Switzerland is not part of the EU. Switzerland is not part of NATO. In many ways, Switzerland is a neutral country. What are some of the downsides of living in Switzerland? Well, I have personally never lived in Switzerland, but just from what I get to hear from people, there are a number of things. Okay, I think first of all, it's not so easy to make friends. It's also like this in Austria, my country of birth, my native country. It's not very easy, if you're an outsider, it's not very easy for you to make friends in Austria, Germany, or Switzerland. It's just not easy because the people are more reserved, they are direct, they're confrontational. If you're more on the softer side of things and you don't like being confronted about different things several times throughout the day, maybe Central Europe is not the right place for you, because people in Central Europe, they are direct, they are confrontational, and they are not scared of telling you what you need to hear. And this is maybe hard for a lot of people. Like if you're coming from a collectivist society, I'm just now thinking about like people from Latin America, and I've talked to some of them who have spent time in Germany, and they were like, I could never live there. Like the people are just not approachable. They're too cold. They're too confrontational. Like in Latin America, the people are also very communicative, but they're not very direct with a lot of things. They're more warm-hearted, and like criticism is not very welcome in many Latin countries, and how people deal with criticism in Latin countries is that they smile about it, or they stop talking altogether, or they just turn around and walk away. A behavior that would be completely unacceptable in Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. Those three European countries, they work by a different set of rules, which might suit you very well. It really depends on where you're from, what your values are, what you want to do. Like I personally, I don't think I could live in that region anymore, for the simple reason that I changed a lot, and I don't mind the confrontational attitude. I don't mind directness. In fact, I'm a very direct person. However, I like balance. I like being around people that are also nice, that maybe do a little bit of butt kissing here and there, because that's also nice to receive. But if you're just around people that are like really hardcore conservative and hardcore like cold and direct and confrontational, and that's a thing you have to decide for yourself. Another country I like spending time in is Mexico. And you've heard me talk about Mexico a lot over the past years. I think Mexico is great. It's lenient with a lot of stuff, visa policies. The residence permit, requirements have changed a lot over the years too. It's definitely gotten tighter and tighter and tighter. Income requirements have gone up a lot, not proportionately with inflation. At least I don't think so. Even though we have tons of inflation everywhere, I don't think that salaries have gone up that much in Mexico. Consumer prices have. Yet you need to meet much higher income requirements than you were used to. One of the reasons why Mexico works for me is because the proximity to Texas. I can drive my car across one of the southern borders, and that's very comfortable. If I want to go deeper into Mexico, I can do that. I'm not doing it that much. Sometimes I go to Mexico to meet friends. Sometimes I go on vacation. Sometimes for work, meeting colleagues and stuff. But as a rule of thumb, I will probably not be living in Mexico for a good chunk of the year, simply because I have other bases now that suit me a little bit better. Even though I love Mexico, there are some places that I think are underrated, with not too many North American tourists, not too many gringos. So it's definitely one of the places I live in. Now, what about corruption in Mexico? What about danger? Well, there is danger associated with gangs. The people with guns in Mexico are typically the bad guys. I'm not talking about law enforcement or the military, but I'm just talking about regular people, if you can call them regular people who own guns in Mexico. It's mostly the bad people who own guns in Mexico. Why? It's practically impossible to get a gun in Mexico. I think there are only 2 legal gun stores in Mexico. That's it, no más. But it's a big country of, I think, over 120 million people, but they only got 2 gun stores. So where are all the guns coming from? Well, they're coming from America. They're bringing them across the border. Of course, it's all done illegally, and then they end up in the hands of criminals. Since you have reached the final part of this video, I'm now going to reveal my top investments with you. Actually, all investments that I have, because I'm going to be open with you, and I promised you full transparency throughout this video. Now that we've talked about the countries I spend time in, some of them I live in, let's talk about my investments. I mean, obviously, to me it's obvious. To you it might not be. I'm invested in crypto. I've already been invested in crypto since 2017. Yes, the first bull run that happened in 2000, like late 2017, early 2018, it ended. I was invested there, and the first bull run, I did not make money. I lost money because, I just didn't sell at the right time. I bought a little bit late and I sold way too late for a loss, and I learned a lot from that experience. But since then, things have really picked up. I've learned my lessons, and crypto is working for me. 2, I own real estate. So I bought real estate in Spain, and pros and cons here. I've talked about this in another video, which you can watch once you're done watching this video. And so this is another investment that I have. So I basically use it as like a second home. It's like a second place to fall back to. When I visit my family, I can go there, I can spend time there, and it's kind of convenient to have your own apartment because you decide what you place inside your apartment. So I like owning my own place, but then I made the decision to rent it out while I was not there, and then we got a bad tenant, and that changed my perspective on a lot of things. Even though I was familiar with the laws in Spain, the rental laws, specifically the anti-landlord laws, I was familiar with all of them. Yet I decided to take my chances and I rented out the apartment, and now I am not regretting it. But it's like you already know what the truth is, but you're not really feeling the pain until you're in that experience yourself, and that's exactly what I'm going through right now. It's not really pain, but it's just, it's conscious now. It was kind of conscious before, but now it's really conscious because I have gone through it. And so I'm like, I probably do not want to be a landlord in Spain anymore at all. Just not, because I want to own real estate in a place where I can protect it, or where the government protects me, and neither is the case in Spain. So I'm thinking about selling my apartment. I also own antiques. Okay, this is a long time passion of mine. This is like a passion that I started at the age of 12, where my uncle and I decided, we would go on eBay and start shopping for antiques, which we did very successfully actually, because it was the golden time of the internet. It was like early 2000s, 2001 when we started, and it was just a dream come true. We were buying all these, sold as like rooftop find buckets and stuff. But not only that, we also bought a lot of coins that, were like listed on eBay for the first time. And how it works with antiques, if you want to really get a good deal, or good deals, is you want to buy from people who don't know what they're talking about. And so there were a lot of, like people where their spouse had passed and they put an auction on eBay not knowing what it really was. And sometimes they put their whole collections together, and the photos weren't that great. It was done in amateur way that really benefited a lot of the collectors and also the dealers, of course. And we managed to grab a lot of coins there for very reasonable prices, and we held on to a lot of those coins. And with antiques, just like with other things too that are rare, supply and demand, it pushes up the price. And there are many people who aren't even thinking about selling their antique coins, because antique coins, they're a great hedge against inflation. So having them is just fantastic. Antique coins is just one of the things you can invest in. You can invest in antique paintings or baseball cards, or you can invest in signatures. If you really know what you're doing, if you can verify things to make sure that what you're buying is actually authentic, legitimate. If you buy things from like garage sales, you can make good money if you know what you're buying, because oftentimes people that are doing these sales, they don't know what they are holding in their hands because they're just not experts at it. So oftentimes you can get really good deals, especially in America, but in Europe too. And then also gold and silver, it's been something that I've been doing also for a long time. It kind of started at the age of 12 too. So I was actually very fortunate to have been introduced to this world very early on in life, where I learned from a relative of mine and where I really discovered a passion that also connected me to digital marketing. So it wasn't just about the antique collecting and making money with that or learning a business. It also connected me to marketing online. All right, let's wrap up this video. I really hope you enjoyed the content that I shared with you today. I know this video has been a little bit longer than usual. I really hope that you got a good amount of value out of it. If you're interested in obtaining a residence permit in one of the countries that I just discussed, feel free to reach out to us now. You can visit our website, which you should see displayed right below the video. As always, I appreciate you. We appreciate you. The whole company appreciates you. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments below, and we see you on the next video.